Today, Poland's president was at the site of that deadly missile strike that struck inside his country. CNN has learned that Ukrainian officials are also on the ground there, joining U.S. and Polish investigators. Ukrainian President Zelensky says it will not be possible to draw conclusions about who is responsible for the missile yet.
But he added he is convinced it is Russia who's to blame. President Biden said that the evidence indicates otherwise. Now, CNN also has learned that the U.S. is running low on some high-end weapon systems and ammunition to send to Ukraine. We have Natasha Bertrand and Oren Lieberman with us up next. Natasha, you're first on the new reporting on this investigation into that missile. What are you learning?
When news broke that this missile had struck Poland, killing 2 people, we're learning that there was really a scramble, and underscoring the urgency there is the fact that President Biden, who was in Bali at the time for the G20 summit, was woken up in the middle of the night. We saw him speaking to his Polish counterpart, President Duda, on the phone. Biden was still dressed very casually in a T-shirt and khakis. And, you know, his national security advisor, his secretary of state were both with him, also speaking to their counterparts, all in the scramble to get more information about what had happened. Of key importance, of course, the learning whether or not this had been a deliberate attack on Poland, a NATO ally. Now, as news came in, as intelligence came in, as they spoke to their Polish counterparts, it became increasingly clear, we're told, based on this intelligence, that this was not a deliberate attack and that actually it was more likely an accidental strike by a Ukrainian missile. And so what we're told is that the intelligence that the U.S. had been receiving, based on an analysis of the debris at the site, what the Poles had been looking at and telling the Americans, it all pointed in one direction, that this was an anti-aircraft, anti-air missile that the Ukrainians had launched. And so one of the really key issues that night was kind of getting everyone on the same page about what had happened, and that includes, of course, the Ukrainians, guys.
So, Oren, you've been reporting on also the low weapons stockpile that the U.S. has to send to Ukraine and the effect that that could have. So what does that mean?
So critical distinction we'll start with here. There is the U.S.'s stockpile, what it keeps in reserve for its own war plans based on different emergency and contingency situations. That remains and will be untouched. The question is the excess here, what the U.S. has available to send. And these, according to sources who spoke with CNN and officials, were finite to begin with. We're now nearly 9 months into this war, and we have seen repeatedly the pace at which the U.S. sends some very high-end weaponry, the Javelin anti-tank missile, the Stinger anti-aircraft missile, as well as some of the other conventional ammunition, 155mm artillery ammunition. All of this has been going over in plane loads in very large numbers since the beginning, and according to our sources, some of the stocks of the excesses that the U.S. can send are beginning to dwindle simply because they were finite from the beginning. What's the U.S. doing in this case? First, as we just heard from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Mark Milley, the aid, the supplies will continue. But there is now this international coalition we've seen over the past few months, the Ukraine Contact Group, as it's called, to find available stocks and make sure they can get to Ukraine, even if that involves putting together a system from one place and the ammunition for it for another. That's part of the solution. The U.S. is also trying to ramp up its defense industrial base to make sure it can produce more weaponry and can speed that up as needed. The U.S., for the first time in some 20 years, isn't at war after the withdrawal from Afghanistan, so there wasn't this great demand to keep producing. But as we're seeing with the U.S. providing Ukraine, it's time to speed up that production once again, since the expectation is this war continues.
Okay, Natasha Bertrand, Oren Lieberman, thank you both very much. Let's bring in now former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Ivo Daalder. He now serves as the president of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Mr. Ambassador, great to have you here. It's really interesting to hear Natasha report on the scramble that happened when this bomb fell on Poland. They had to wake up, obviously, President Biden. He was out of the country, and just, everyone that had to be alerted, and just how much cooler heads prevailed in that moment of confusion and did not escalate. Is that normally what happens when a bomb falls on a NATO country?
Well, you would hope so. You would hope that if this happens again, the same kind of deliberative effort is made to find out what the facts are. The problem with war and the problem with having so many missiles flying across the skies of Ukraine that we saw in the run-up to this accident is that things can go wrong, and if they do go wrong, you got to figure out what's going on. So The system works in many ways. It churned through the process. An explosion happened. The polls went very quickly to decide to figure out what was going on. We looked at all of the intelligence data that we might have, intercepts of conversations, trajectories of missiles that were being flown at the time, in order to get as much information as possible. And at the same time, the U.S. government and other governments were out there in force, starting with the president himself, but throughout. Our ambassador in Poland, our ambassador at NATO, we're all making the case to say, let's find out what is going on before we decide how to respond. That can come later. That depending on what the outcome of this investigation is, that can come later. So I think cool heads prevailed, which is what you would hope from your leaders, and not have people start immediately thinking about retaliation and how to hit the Russians before you know what was going on. And I think that's what happened.
Ambassador Daalder, what do you think about the Ukrainians now joining this investigation? President Zelensky says they'll be there in the morning at the site in Poland. They're not a disinterested party here, and the president's already said that it was a Russian missile. Do you think they should be there on scene participating in the investigation?
Yeah, I think it's perfectly fine for them to be part of the investigation, which is being led by the Poles. There are U.S. personnel on the ground as well to help identify, and presumably are others as well. Having the Ukrainians there is appropriate, given that it may have been, and it looks like it was, a Ukrainian missile. It certainly came from their territory or across their border. Just to point out, I think President Zelensky went a little further ahead on his skis when he immediately said it was a Russian missile, and sort of cornered himself and made it more difficult for him to admit the possibility that it might have been an accident. At the same time, let's be clear, none of this would have happened unless the Russians had invaded Ukraine and had launched close to 100 missiles, the largest number of missiles in the war to date, on all of kinds of Ukrainian targets. So the real fault here is with Russia. It's not with Ukraine. This is an accident that it couldn't have helped. It means we need to provide more, better, capable air defense systems to the Ukrainians. And probably a lesson that we learned that perhaps the government in Kyiv can learn is when something like this happens, let's find out what the facts are before we start calling on, as Zelensky did, NATO to start intervening in this war.
Ambassador Ivo Daalder, thank you.